Welcome to another edition of California Triathlon Soup. I'm Tom Richmond, and we are here today with Amber Gaffney, who is Dr. Amber Gaffney, and she is the assistant professor of social psychology at Humboldt State University. For all those who haven't listened to California Triathlon Soup, we try to be two parts triathlon, one part culture, and a dash of silly. And so this should be a pretty relaxed conversation for 45 minutes with some great folks in the endurance space. Amber, welcome to California Triathlon Soup.
Thanks so much for having me, Tom.
I have known you for many years, so we'll probably get into that a little bit later. And I definitely have a couple stories, but why don't you talk a little bit about your background in cycling and triathlon and running, and then also some of the things you do in your professional life?
Oh, that's long. That's my whole life right there, Tom. So I was an athlete most of my life. I had dual interests in both academics and athleticism, and I played all the sports when I was a kid and didn't realize that I was into endurance. I went to a small school, so I was kind of a big fish in a small pond, and I was able to do sprints and track, like running track, and I thought that's what I was good at. It turns out later that, if I had any talent in athletics, it was in endurance. I didn't pick up endurance running until graduate school. I would do kind of longish runs, but I started running marathon distances in grad school, and then simultaneously bought a road bike as a gift to myself. I lived near a big mountain, Mount Baldy in Claremont, California. And I just wanted to ride my bike up that, and then started riding my bike up that and realized that, whoa, the harder you ride a bike, the less you think about all of the stressors in life. So that got me to the top of mountains pretty quickly. And then I just kind of took off cycling from there. I moved up really quickly on local levels of cycling. And then I guess it would be about a year after I started cycling, I was picked up by a pro team and I started racing on professional teams. And I raced for the national team on the track on a bike. And that's kind of my story when it comes. And then when I stopped cycling, I took an assistant professor position, and I started running again because, man, I missed running. And then the last few years, I don't do anything competitive anymore. But what I do is I just go on really long runs, and I love them. So,
And that's the actual description I would figure that you would give, but you missed out on a lot of information. And Humble is, I went and looked at a social media post from 2015 in preparation for this. And I'm going to get right to the heart of the matter. So one day, I think we connected, and living in Los Angeles, and let's get out to the Rose Bowl and put a run together. And so we're out there running at the Rose Bowl just to kind of blow off some steam. And my question to you was, so how did the year go? And your answer was fine. And then you relayed that you had won a gold medal at the Am Games. Is that true?
oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. And Tom, I think that might have been the day in my mind that I psychologically quit bike racing.
It was the day that we met was one of the worst days ever. I think that's what you're trying to say, and I get that.
It was good and it was bad, but it was such an interesting thing because I'd spent that entire summer before that, living at the Olympic Training Center. I'm like a woman who was 30 years old living in dorms, and it just become kind of psychologically cracked, and I missed academia. And I was at a track workout because we were doing all of these things like lead up to the Olympics on the track and trying to select the team. And mid workout, I was just like, I'm done. I'm done with this. And I told my coach that I wasn't coming back after the break. And I was like, hey, I want to go for a run. I haven't been able to run in like over a year. Nobody's let me run. So I was like, hey, Tom's in past. I'm going to call Tom.
Right. And I love that run. And we had a great run.
Yeah.
And my favorite part was the modesty of, well, how did your day, how was your last year? And you mentioned gold medal Pan Am Games. And I tell that story quite frequently to people. And I'm just like, well, that is a lot of humility. And so, because if I had gotten a gold medal at the Pan Am Games, believe me, everybody would know about it.
Can I tell you a funny story, Tom? So occasionally I have a student who will watch my house when I'm gone. And so I use myself as examples all the time. I'll say something like, oh, back when I was bike racing. So the students know that I, liked bikes. But I had one of my students was watching my house, and we have a basement. And I have my cat's litter box is downstairs in the basement. She was changing the litter box, and then she comes to school the next week, and she's like, hey, did you all know that Gaffney's like a legit cyclist? She has medals that are hanging over her cat's litter box in her basement.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
That's
because
awesome.
my husband wants to drag medals and trophies out, and I'm like, no, I don't like stuff like that. It collects dust, so we just to appease him, I keep it over the litter box in the basement.
We're going to get back to the day that you quit cycling because I do remember a bit of that story, and I want to get back to that. But you mentioned your husband Jacob.
Yeah.
And the first time I met you, we were biking Mount Baldy on Glendora Ridge Road and going down, I think it was frontside GMR.
Oh,
And I'm
yeah.
desperately trying to catch you, which was a mistake. I was like, who was that and what are they doing? And so I think we met, we talked, connected, and that's it. But I met Jacob later on at one of the tour events. I think it was Amgen Tour California, and got to know him. And he's a great guy. And I believe he's your mechanic, Sherpa, and number one like supporter.
He was before I was hooked up with a pro team. He did literally everything and was so incredibly supportive and just like super into it. He knew way more about women's cycling than I did. And I knew nothing about men's cycling, so that should tell you something. But he knew, and when I got onto a pro team and I started introducing him to some of the women athletes, he was just like starstruck because these were the people that he looked up to. He couldn't tell you a damn thing about the men's peloton, but the women's peloton, he was pumped on.
Oh yeah, and he's always there. And I want to get to the because you were on the 24 team, and I want to get to that. My favorite you and Jacob story that I'm pretty sure not too many people know about is when I found out you had gotten engaged, I was like, I need to see some bling. Like, where's the hardware? Like, hello. And what can you, if you remember, can you tell me what that story was?
I'm not sure. I think you're going to bring up some wheels, though, as my guest,
I
Tom.
am. I
Yeah.
am going to bring up some wheels.
Well, when we decided to get married, it was also very a pragmatic thing because I had started bike racing. And, there are two types of bike racers, those who crash and those who will crash, right? And
Yeah.
so I became into the ranks of one of those who had crashed. And I was in grad school, did not have health insurance. And my partner at the time had, a great job. He was working where was he working at that time? I think he was working at Caltech at that time. And, good health insurance is like, we got to do this. We got to get married. And I was like, okay, I have some conditions on getting married. I keep my own last name. I'm very attached to that. And he said, cool, I'm not taking your name either. So we agreed on that one. We're getting married on a mountaintop to which we have to hike. And I'm never going to wear a ring because if you give me a diamond, I'm just going to pawn it because I like to live my life through a Bob Dylan song. But we were able to say we used that money to buy wheels, which was pretty awesome. So I had a sweet set of wheels when, again, I was responsible for buying my own stuff for a bike. And that's really expensive.
So let me get this straight. In lieu of a diamond or a wedding ring, you took like Zip 808s or something like that.
Yeah, I think, what did I get? I think I got the 303s because, again, with the 303s, and if you're buying your own wheels and you're racing your bike, you can use those for any type of bike race. And for me, I could not afford, and I could not justify having like 3 sets of wheels. Like, these are my climbing wheels, these are my crit wheels. I couldn't justify that. So the 303s were solid. I could do everything on those. So we went with those.
I love it. I love it. Well, that's one of the other stories that I like to tell. So to go back to the team 24, your experience with, in professional cycling, certainly if you went to the differences that you notice between maybe if you're on the men's tour versus the women's tour. I remember back in 2015, maybe 16, when we lent Team 24 our team vehicle for a camp.
Oh,
We
yeah.
our Caltri one for a camp. I believe it was up in Ventura.
Yeah, that was so nice, Tom.
But you guys we would do it anytime. But you guys are the money for women's teams, I think is quite a bit different than men's teams. Would that be fair?
That is completely fair. Yeah. And I do think, and granted, it's been, I've been out of the game for a bit, but I think it might be a little bit better now, but it's, to my knowledge, it's still not even close. And so one of the things that we had on a team, so the team was 2016 then, and then of course they became 2020, although no Olympics this year. So I don't know what they're calling themselves these days, but they are always, they name their team after the Olympics basically. So at that point it was 2016. So what we had in lieu of like large salaries and all of these things were people who were incredibly dedicated. So people like you who were willing to help us out. And we also had phenomenal sponsors. We were sponsored by Zip and SRAM, who were freaking awesome, and they treated us so well. So those sponsors treated us just as well as any of the men's teams that they sponsored. And we rode Felt bikes, which I couldn't say enough about Felt as a company, just like amazing. So we did have incredibly good sponsors, but in terms of the differences between what men and women can make in cycling, it's massive, right? Like for UCI teams for men, there's a minimum wage, and there wasn't a minimum wage for women. So women who were on the UCI circuit, they would get anything from a jersey and a bike to making $14,000 a year. Some of them might make a little bit more than that, but nothing compared to what some of the guys on those big teams were making.
And the Tour of California in the past few years, they brought on a few days, like a mini tour for women. Have you had a chance to go out and see that, or have you heard much about that?
Yeah. So when I was racing, I got to do the Tour of California was doing just a time trial, and I was really lucky. Usually that time trial that the Tour of California was doing just for women, so they would run it while the Tour of California for the men was going. And I got invited to do it. It was by invitation only. And so to me, I felt lucky to just be there. But then they partnered with some other groups. So I know that SRAM was really instrumental to this, and they started expanding it. So it went from a time trial to, then they added Lake Tahoe stages, and then they added a circuit race or a crit around the Capitol in Sacramento. And I got to race in that. I think it's even larger now, but and man, I can't tell you, because I'm looking out of my house right now. I fly a California flag. Like, I think California is literally the greatest place in the world. And so to me, to get to race on my home turf around our capital was just awesome. So anyways,
So you actually got a chance to participate.
Oh yeah, and I was just so stoked. I got to see our state capitol, and because Tom, that I'm not cool, right? We can both say, like, if you want to call somebody a nerd, that's fine. But like when I was in fourth grade, I took a trip to the state capitol, and I thought I was going to get to meet Barbara Boxer. And my mom had to tell me, she doesn't live at the state capitol, Amber. She's not even there. She's in Washington. But I thought that I was going to meet Barbara Boxer, because I always really loved women politicians, in fourth grade. So when I got to race my bike around that capitol, I was just stoked.
Amber, I live with a 15-year-old daughter, and I've learned phrases like lit. You're going to have to put the word lit in a lot. And then also I've learned something new called slap. It slaps. And that's, if you put those things together as a 50-year-old male, I have to tell you that your teenager in your life just has new respect for you.
So here's what I do, because in part of my research, I study a lot of rhetoric and group identity. I mean, I study more than that, but so one of the things I've always been really interested is slang use. And even as a kid, I had a really hard time picking up slang, because I never felt like I was one of the cool kids, so I shouldn't be able to say things like hella. It just didn't pop out naturally to me. So I never got on. I knew the slang, I just never said it. But now as I'm aging, I have a harder time learning the slang. So then I go to my students and I'm like, so what are you all talking about these days? Can I learn some of the slang? Just because I'm interested.
And then they're like, sure. Yeah. Okay.
Oh yeah, they entertain me. And I've done a few studies on it, so I just think it's fun.
On your 2016 team, because I want to move on at some point to talk about some of your work in sociology and your distance running for sure. But in your 2016 team, there were some serious athletes that were part of that team. I'm sure Jacob, when his jaw dropped, so did everybody else. Why don't you talk about some of the other people that were part of the 2016 team and some of the impact that they made on you?
When I raced for Optum. That was a team at that point, and they had a women's team and a men's team. And that was the first pro team that I raced for. And they were phenomenal. There was so much talent on there. And, Lauren Hall was on there. Lauren Hall has since retired, but she still works really hard with women's cycling in the US just to make women's cycling better. And she's a good person. Like, I had her Skype into a class when I was teaching a class to talk about the state of women's cycling, which was awesome for my students. And, Jade Wilcoxon, who's since retired, she was an amazing talent. And I think she started bike racing when she was like 30 years old and just like flew up through the ranks quickly. And then went back to her when she retired, went back to her career. There were way more too. But when I joined 2016, Kristen Armstrong was affiliated with the team. And that's one of those things. If you know bike racing, Kristen Armstrong, she has like, what, 3 gold medals? I think her last gold medal she got when she was like 44 years old, which is amazing and shows you how amazing women's bodies are. Who else did we have? Actually, Lauren raced with us on 2016 for a little bit, Lauren Hall, I was so happy to be on a team with her again.
Dottie was associated with that.
And Dotsie Bosch, one of my coaches, but she's also a silver medalist and just an all-around awesome person. We have Sarah Hammer was affiliated with that team for a while. She's the most decorated U.S. cyclist in history, but people don't know that. Like, how many world titles she has on the track is amazing. So it was really cool to get to race with her. Jen Valente, she's younger, but just a massive talent on the track. And so that team had a real knack for pulling out and picking out people that, looked as if they were going towards the Olympics. So it was fun.
It was the outside looking in on your rise was Amber Gaffney, who now she's doing what? Then she just did this. And it was a pretty quick climb up the ladder for you. I mean, there are a lot of folks that spend many seasons and don't go up as high or as fast as you did.
Yeah, I think, and it is one of those things with women's cycling that I think is a bit different. I think that at least this is in the US. It's different in other countries for sure, where cycling is a sport that more people know of. But in the US, people just don't know about cycling. And then a lot of women start cycling in the US much later. And so I think that, if they have that talent, then they move up quickly. So,
yeah, no, for sure. Well, I appreciate that. And one of the things that makes you a remarkable human being is we've reached out, we've talked many times, you doing a soft spin and me breathless on a bicycle, trying to hold your wheel. And we talked about sociology and group identity. And I remember, early where California Triathlon has this, 5,000 person team nationally, and there's all these different personalities. And, I would come to you and you would say, oh, that's this. And I would say, oh, I didn't know there was a name to that. So I remember the term BIRGing.
Basking and reflected glory. That's from
Basking,
Cialdini's work. Yep.
basking and reflected glory. So there's all these in general terms. I would love to kind of set you up, and then so one of the things we see when we have folks come into endurance, and we try to start from the very beginning all the way to having some elite athletes on the team, and you can sort of start. I don't know if it's fair, but you can sort of bucket them by saying, okay, this person has had characteristics of somebody else I knew, and then what was the result typically? And so you start to get a sense of who they are. Are they a bucket lister? Are they a grinder? Why do they do what they do? And the one thing that comes for me that I always see is, are they internally motivated or are they externally motivated? And the folks that are internally motivated stay with this sport a lot longer than the ones that are externally motivated.
Yeah.
So there's that kind of thing. And then BIRGing, I'd love you to explain that. And through your travels, if you've seen some, in broad terms, what are some of the categories that make up endurance athletes that you've seen and that we can look for?
Yeah, and so I mean, I'm not going to base this in my research as much, because I can tell you a lot of it. Actually, it was pretty beneficial to me to kept me out of trouble to have my science mind on, or my science hat on, when I was bike racing, because you travel around the country with a bunch of other people in a team van. You're sharing rooms with people. There's always going to be squabbles. People are going to not like each other. There's going to be drama, and I was never involved in any of that. And I think that a large part of that was like, this is my science hat, and then I was able to explain the psychological mechanism behind why it was happening to myself, so I just sort of stayed out of it. But I think one thing that I really noticed, and I didn't realize it when I was bike racing, but I realized this when I quit bike racing, is that there are people who train because they love to race, and then there are people who just love to train. And I realized that I was the latter, but I didn't realize that until after. I was like, yeah, a race is a race, and it feels fine to, obviously I'm a human, I like to win, but I really love to train. I like to be out there like by myself and just like digging real hard, or go on a ride with a friend like you. To me, that's really, really fun. And I guess for me, the motivation wasn't about the racing, if that makes sense. And I don't think that that makes the best professional athlete. I think the latter is probably the one that makes like the best professional athlete, because that person's going to make career moves based on the sport. Whereas somebody like me is probably going to just continue to do things only as long as they're fun. I don't know if that makes sense, but that was something I learned about myself later on.
And then, like when I use the term BIRGing, basking in reflected glory, can you? I think when I used it, it was related to someone who would get an amazing coach, or maybe somebody who would pick a particular event to do, and in that they would feel they would do something for them in terms of reflected glory. Can you go through that for a second?
Well, so I might ask you a couple of questions about that, because generally the basking and reflected glory, is a little phenomenon, and it's the sense that, like, you see this with people who have a sports team, and then, yeah, we won. I'm like, you're not really, you're not playing for the Giants. You're not out there pitching the ball or throwing the ball or whatever the case is, but it's still we. Or, people tend to, if they know someone who's famous or who's done something well, then they're like, oh yeah, my friend so-and-so. It's like, you didn't do it. And so then they get that glow of being next to sort of the celebrity or the fact. Or if we're friends, you do this with a friend as well. So you do something really great, Tom. And then I'm like, oh, you know what? My friend Tom. And then I can kind of share in that experience with you. It makes me feel good about myself by aligning myself with you. But it
Yeah.
sounds to me like you're talking about something that's a little bit different.
Well, I think when I had used it before, it was give me the name of the one of the best cycling coaches in the world, or Greg LeMond becomes a cycling coach, and so the next thing you know, Greg, where I hire Greg, I'm this like average age grouper, middle of the pack age grouper, and I hire Greg LeMond as my coach, and I get to tell everybody, the value is I get to tell everybody that he's my coach, which obviously means that I'm, awesome, because why would Greg LeMond waste his time coaching me, right?
Oh, right.
So it's that type of connection that I have seen with in coaching and things like that.
Oh, yeah, that makes perfect sense. And that would have been why we sparked the conversation about basking in reflected glory.
Yeah. So I love the fact that when I would come and have something that was, I'm not sure, an irrational, you'd be like, oh no, that's chapter 33. That's perfectly reasonable. That's one of the things that makes Dr. Gaffney so important.
And also simultaneously obnoxious. I was on everybody's doing the Zoom things with their friends while we're social distancing. So my husband and I were in a Zoom meeting with our friends last week, and we were about 45 minutes into this. And then someone said, took Amber 45 minutes to start talking about research. Oh yeah.
Well, I'm not going to say it, but it took us 27 and a half minutes before somebody mentioned COVID. So thanks, Amber.
Sorry, it's on my mind. I have a bunch of studies out on it right now. So
Oh, that's fantastic. So let's talk a little bit about the worst day. I really want to get to running, because that's of interest. But that day that you decided, I just don't want to do this anymore. If I remember correctly, there's in some ways the way teams are selected was part of the impact. and I don't think this was relative to you,
Mm-hmm.
but how teams are selected isn't always cut and dry. Hey, first, second, third, there you go. There might be coaches' decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And in general terms, what have you seen in terms of talent or coaches' decisions or how all that stuff works?
Since I have not been bike racing, I think they've changed the structure of the national team quite a bit. Occasionally you would see things that there would be, somebody's favorite who wasn't necessarily the coach's favorite, but it's the, president of USA Cycling's favorite, something like that. And when there's the perception of bias anywhere is when people start to get hurt or people start to throw, blame around and stuff. And so, I think that happens just about anywhere. On trade teams, that's a bit different. And so when I raced for Optum, Rachel Heel was the director, and Rachel was amazing because what she did was really cool. She picked people. At some point, everybody's talented, but she knew she wouldn't have a good team unless she had good people on the team. So she interviewed people, and she wanted to make sure when she interviewed those people that those people were people who were willing to win, but they were also willing to win for their teammates. Road cycling's a team sport, right? You only have one person who stands with the yellow jersey on the top of the podium, but that person gets there because they have a team of people who helped to put them there. And so Rachel was really phenomenal at picking out people who were equally happy to stand on the top themselves or to be the person who blew themselves off the back and finished like 30 minutes late so that they could put one of their teammates on the top podium. And that was a cool thing to see. So, and the directors and coaches and things who I have seen were not willing to do that. Those were the people where I thought, you're not going to win. You're never going to win if you go like that. You really got to get people who identify strongly with the team, who are willing to self-sacrifice for the team if you want to win.
It's interesting because you can look at sports that you're drawn to. Let's just take swimming or running versus basketball or soccer. And in one case, there's a distance and you swim a certain distance or you run a certain distance and there's a scoreboard that tells you who's the best.
Mm-hmm.
In the other sports, there's, this one's got potential, or they were injured early, or whatever that may be when they make those selections. So like one is much easier, I would have to believe.
Yeah.
And the other one is more subjective. And, I don't know if there's a right or wrong, but it's difficult when they come to selecting teams based on, takes a lot of trust, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think so. And for me, like that day that you saw me, that was just like the culmination of me, it was because that year I had spent, I don't know, 4 months living in Colorado Springs, the training center there. I was living again in a dorm. I have a PhD, so I was working on my postdoc at the time and constantly questioning, like, what am I doing with my life, right? Like my husband's back home with my cat in Claremont, and here I am living in a dorm room, living my best life. So that was, that was kind of I loved that. And, Colorado is awesome. It was a great environment, but I missed home. And I did one of the things that you're not supposed to do. I didn't tell my coaches, and I was like, I'm going to go take this research trip to Scotland because it was paid for. And I wanted to go to Scotland. This was right after we had, our Pan Am Games. I got to go home to Claremont for a few weeks, but I took a week of that time, flew to Scotland and gave a research talk. And then while at the research talk, got into an amazing discussion with someone who's now a close mentor to me. And it was just like, man, I miss academics and I miss these conversations. And then by the time I got back to the training center, our coach had figured out that I'd left. He was like, what are you doing? You don't do that in the middle of training season. And I was like, yeah, I guess not. I don't know. I mean, I'm an adult. So, but I realized how much I missed academics. And then I applied for the job at HSU. And when I applied for the job at Humboldt State, this area is home for me. So that was cool. I didn't expect to get it because usually academics apply for 100 positions before they get a job talk. But I worked my ass off on the application. And when I realized how hard I was working on that, I realized that I was done. It's like, I want to go back to academics. I don't want to do this anymore. And so it was kind of a sense of, okay, I'm going to go to this training session, continue the training session. I was out at, the track in Carson when I called you, and then I just saw this drama starting to build up, and I'm like, what am I doing? This is dumb. My times are slipping because I'm psychologically not into this. I'm so done with this. And I haven't ran in so long. And again, I know how wild that sounds, but I love to run. And so that's when I called you. And I literally called you as soon as I threw my bike in. I'm like, I need to go for a run. I haven't seen Tom for a while. Let's go for a run, Tom.
And I appreciate that. You did your first marathon, and I did not research this, but for some reason I remember 3:15.
Yeah.
3:15, or just the first marathon with not exactly proper training, right? Like you were doing other things too.
So at that point, I was riding. I do know how much I was riding. I was riding 400 miles a week. And then it killed my uncle because my uncle had gotten into endurance running as well. And he saw my time. He's like, that's such shit. If you would have actually trained, you would have went under 3 hours. And I was like, I didn't even know. Like, I didn't know what a good marathon time was. But I had run, I think 2 days before I ran 26 miles, and my uncle's like, what were you doing? It's called tapering. I was like, dude, I wanted to make sure that I could finish 26 and a half miles. So I ran 26 miles a few days before to make sure I could do it. He was like, okay.
Genius.
Yeah,
Genius.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. So it was just, typical for me, like doing any type of thing. It was like a friend of mine had me do a 50K it was a year or so ago, and I literally had no idea what I was doing. I just started, I put on Bob Dylan and ran for five and a half hours. That's like how I did it. I didn't track anything. I was just like, this is cool. Okay, now I'm done.
Oh, I love that. And now you're in the distance, and you're in the distance. Do you have like centuries coming up, or what are you thinking?
So another thing that I realized about myself, Tom, is that I'm a super competitive person that hates competition. It actually makes me quite nervous. And so I had a friend who had me do a 50K with him. And again, it was one of those things. I signed up for it, didn't know what I was getting into. I love Bob Dylan. When I was bike racing, I trained listening to Bob Dylan, which I know everybody in the world can make fun of, but I find Bob Dylan's music very motivating. And so, I put on Bob Dylan, and I started running in this 50K, and it was a beautiful course, but I was around people, and I'm like, I don't do sports to be around people. I don't run on trails to be around people. So that was kind of obnoxious. And then the two guys I was running with, they dropped me within the first 10K, and I was like, man, maybe I'm out of shape. And then of course I caught one of them 20K in, and then I caught the other one with maybe, I don't know, I guess it would have been 30K in at that point, and dropped both of them. I didn't mean to. I tried to wait for both of them, but I ended up finishing an hour ahead of one of them and like 40 minutes ahead of the other one. So it was just one of those things. I did it, and then I think I was the third place woman. And so my friend immediately starts like, you need to start, and like sixth overall in the event. And he's like, you need to start doing this. You could have a pro career here. And I'm like, nope, I'm not doing any more professional athlete careers. I'm just running. So, I mean, I guess a long story to say, the thing that drives me to run is just being out, sometimes listening to podcasts, mostly just listening to nature and or Bob Dylan, and running hard and feeling exhausted when I'm done and getting to see cool things.
So also a Bob Dylan fan, and since California Triathlon Soup is two parts, cycling, endurance, triathlon, one part fun. You got to give me that go-to song. You've only got X number of minutes on your left. What's that song?
The answer is it depends. If I want to go fast, if I think like the thing that, had I gone to the Olympics, I was going to try to get somebody to say, like, if the event was a track event that I was going for, and I was going to really try hard to get somebody to put Bob Dylan's Gospel Plow on, because his version of Gospel Plow has such a fast beat. I just freaking love it. And it's such a great metaphor for endurance anyways, because, he says, keep your hand on that plow, hold on. Right. And so it's just, that's what you're doing when you're like digging deep. You just keep going, right? Keep going.
We'll put a link when we publish this. We'll put a link to that song so everybody can get a chance to keep going.
Yeah, it's that one's an amazing one. And then just because I think that, no, I know, I'm not even going to hedge on this one. I know on this that the greatest song ever written, and also the greatest poem ever written, is Bob's Visions of Johanna, just like hands down, that song is amazing. And I just remember when I was training out, GMR area, Baldy area, and that song would come on. It didn't matter how much pain I was in. I just had this beautiful visual tapestry in front of me about what that song is about, or whatever I made it up that it was about. And to me, I just think that song's amazing, particularly the one on the bootleg number 7, that version of it, just spot on. So those are my passion songs.
You have a PhD, and but to be so young and so uninformed, and to ignore Hard Rain's Gonna Fall, I just leave you there. I just want to.
I think, but that's low hanging fruit, though, right? I mean, it's low hanging fruit. It's like when somebody says, "Mr. Tambourine Man," yeah, duh.
Oh yeah. I should have flipped it over to the B side, right? And then I would have found the good stuff. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I know they
exactly.
do stuff different up there in Humboldt. I
Yeah,
guess.
but you have a hard rain's gonna fall. So that when I was married, the person who married us, my stepfather, he was ordained for the occasion. I put in a lyric from a hard rain's gonna fall in there, and I did at my own when I said my vows in lieu of vows. I played a song, a Bob Dylan song, of course. Shelter from the Storm on a guitar. That was the last time I
Oh.
played in public. But yeah, and fun fact about, because I love talking Bob, most of my publications, I have inserted some obscure Bob Dylan lyric into the publication, and I have no less than 3 Bob Dylan lyrics in my dissertation. So
He was on tour this year before everything happened.
yes, I do know. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah. That was sad. We had looked at that, and I looked at his set, and I wanted to go, and unfortunately, because a certain song wasn't playing, I said, I'm not paying that kind of money unless I get my song. So my wife and I decided we were not going. So let's last thing before I let you go. It's been just such a good conversation. So 2 times I've had the chance to be the assistant Sherpa on the AC 100. And I want to caveat that. So I've been the Sherpa and done training for it. And both times, either the athlete got injured ahead of time or actually injured during the race. And I never got to actually compete in the AC 100. And rules, I'm sure, have changed at these times. So are we going to see you going for Western States for AC 100? What are you going to look for something else?
Um, no, my guess is no. Again, one of the things that I really like to do, and I know that although AC 100 is kind of cool, yeah, but no, I doubt that I would do that. One of the things that I like to do is just I pick a mountain. So I live close to the Trinity Alps now, and so pick a mountain out in the Trinity Alps and do a day run. So it's like, oh, okay, there's a 30-mile run down, or on my birthday every year I run 40 miles. It's just kind of stuff like that, but it's not. I don't foresee myself doing anything that is quote unquote competitive, if that makes sense. I run sprints at the beach, but I do that just because it's fun. And it's not because I'm training for anything specific. And I killed my friend that I run with, that he was like, he does heart rate training and all of that. And he's like, do you even know how much you run each week? No, I literally have no idea. I just do it.
Well, well, I'm going to give you. I live in a college community in rural Virginia, and I run with a and bike with some professors, and I've learned things like what tenured track is, and adjunct, and lines. Things I never would have thought I would learn about, and there's always been these conversations about how do you take. In this case, he's a sociology professor. How do you take that and combine it with your passion, like running, so that the class would be, a 90-minute runs 3 times a week, but the discussions would be fantastic.
Hmm.
So I think when you pull that trick off,
Yeah.
that's a class that I'd like to audit.
Yeah, well, Tom, you can audit my classes are online right now, so Tom, you can really listen into any of my lectures. But I actually I quite love to teach, and I teach things, I teach a social influence class. Come on, that's really
Yeah.
cool. So I get to teach really awesome things that are directly in line with all of my research, which is amazing. So, and also one of the ways in which I get how I create hypotheses is if I'm on a run, or it used to be when I would be on a ride. I did this all throughout graduate school. I would be out going hard and having a problem trying to come up with a specific research design or come up with a hypothesis. And it always comes to me when I'm out running or when I was out riding. Those endorphins, something about it, give you enough confidence to come up with something cool, I think.
Well, we're going to wrap up. I appreciate, and at least the 5 or 6 people that listen to this podcast will certainly appreciate this. We're going to make sure we send you a 23-ounce California Triathlon Soup mug. In fact, we're going to send two. We're going to send one for you and one for Jacob.
Nice.
And sometimes when they travel, they get damaged. We haven't figured out how to package them the right way, but we're going to send two of those out for you guys. Do you have anything else? Anything that you want to say relative to, maybe it's an up and coming cyclist or uh, somebody else? Is there anything you want to leave us with before we let you go?
Ooh, maybe people should not start drinking bleach. Just kidding. Um, so, yeah, I'm trying to think. I mean, so people who are up and coming, I really hope that you do the things that make you happy. Because I think when I was bike racing, I raced my bike as long as it was fun, and it was the same. I got a PhD because it was fun. I became a professor because I thought it was going to be fun, and I've been super lucky to follow and do the things just being driven by the things that I find interesting and fun. And then when they're no longer interesting and fun, I move on to the next thing. So I hope that other people are able to use sport like that, because for me, endurance sport is one of the things that makes me feel kind of sane. I'm never going to be fully sane, but it makes me feel kind of sane.
Amber, or sorry, Dr. Gaffney. Um, I very much appreciate it, and I'm absolutely sure that everybody else will too. Is to get your point of view on a little bit of your history, a little bit of your current work, and some of the things you're looking forward into the future. And thanks again for being a participant in California Triathlon Soup.
Tom, it is always a pleasure to speak with you. We shouldn't let it go so long next time.
Absolutely. Thanks again.